Thank you for coming, ladies. Thank you for being here. If you were not here last night, I'll just really briefly want to tell you that basically last night I shared a testimony of when rebellion and depression and fear had driven me to a place with God where I did not want to be alive anymore, and I was hitting bottom. I was in despair. I had no hope. And God met me there. And he met me there in a very dramatic way. And it came out of my first ever moment being brutally honest with God. I'd put aside all of the teaching I'd had about being respectful and being careful and not expressing doubt, and I just nailed God between the eyes with what I really felt and really thought and what I really saw in this world, and most of it was deceived, and he knew that, but he met me there, and he took the burden of all of the things I'd been carrying, and it was the first time that I experienced the feeling of being valuable and genuinely emotionally loved by God. And it was the beginning, just the first step in a complete change and a transformation in my life. This weekend is taking us sort of through the stages of what he did for me that I know he can and will do for you. So we ended last night in the place where I had been honest with God, and instead of rejecting me or condemning me or being angry with me, he just taken the weight and said, I can take care of that for you, and he'd embraced me. And we were talking a lot about acknowledging the truth that we have wounds and we guard ourselves from this life and from people and from each other. And unfortunately, we also guard ourselves from God. And so last night, I asked everyone to identify a heart wound that you have, and you don't have to share this with anybody. This weekend is not therapy. You're not going to be sitting here sharing your deep, dark secrets. But I asked everyone just to acknowledge a wound that makes you guard yourself from others and from God. And I asked you to be honest and acknowledge that that existed and acknowledge that to God too. So that's where we're starting from this morning. I just want to pray really fast. Lord, I just ask you, thank you for being here. Thank you that we get to sing together. Thank you that there's been such beautiful fellowship here this weekend, and I know that that's going to continue. I just want to ask you to help us today have eyes to see and ears to hear. Help us to only hear you and to only hear truth. If I offer anything that's not honoring to you or untrue, let it be corrected or dismissed. Holy Spirit, help us to only hear you today. And if the enemy tries to speak, give us that nudge and that conviction that we know it's not from you, and we can refute it immediately. Father, protect us. Jesus, thank you for what you did. And I just pray that today honors you. And pray in your name. Amen. So, that day that I unloaded all of my sin and all of the wounds that had been inflicted on me by other people's sin, this was 18 years ago, I was coming from a place of fear and blame and anger. I did not trust God. I believed him. I knew he was real. I was genuinely saved. I'd been saved since I was 11 years old. This was not a moment of salvation in the sense of being ripped out of the hands of hell. This was a moment of salvation, of being saved from myself. And when I admitted to God what I really thought and really believed, because there was a lot of things that I knew academically were true. I'd grown up in the church. I had a lot of biblical knowledge. I knew all the right answers, and I could say all the right things. And I know you all understand that place you can be where your head knows the truth, but your heart doesn't feel it. And when I went to God that day, I went to him with my heart. I said, I get that you're good. I get that you do this stuff and that you've saved people. And I know the Bible stories are true. And I know Jesus is real. And I know if I die today, I'm going to heaven. That's why I'd like to be dead. Thanks. But the reality was I wasn't seeing or believing the love and the joy and the peace and the contentment here. I didn't experience that, and I didn't understand why. And I thought it was because he disapproved of me. I was the bad kid. He just was basically only saving me because he's a good guy. And, if it had been up to him, he would have overlooked that one. So I was coming at him. I was not in a place of like, oh Lord, please. I was in a place of, I want you to listen, and we're done if this doesn't work. Like, I was at the end. When he met me there, it was wonderful, and it was new, and it was healing, and I was stunned, but I didn't trust it. I had been through so many experiences with God through the course of my life, including the day I got saved, where I knew, I could point, even in those days, I could say, oh, I can tell you where God worked. I can show you where he gave me people in my life that did good things. I can show you where he performed miracles for other people. I can show you where he did stuff. Like, I knew he was real. But every time I would have these sort of interactions or these moments with him up to that point in my life, even if I felt encouraged, even if I felt uplifted by it, the effects of that would fade very quickly. And I would always end up back in the same place, and in fact, getting worse as I got older. So when this happened, and it was wonderful, and it was miraculous, and it was new, I thought, same thing's going to happen. Unless I do something different here, this is all going to go away. And I was desperate at that point, absolutely desperate not to continue the way that I was. So the problem was, I was very deceived. I believed a lot of things that, even though I understood the concept of grace, and even though I understood the concept of unmerited favor and Christ giving himself so I didn't have to pay the price, I still deep down believed that in some way I had to earn God's approval, or I had to give something in order to get something. That's how human beings work. And I still hadn't understood that that wasn't how God worked. So when this wonderful thing happened, and I started feeling better that day, I was like, okay, but if this is going to work, then we need more of this. I need more of this. So, okay, God, I basically decided I'll bargain with you. I really did. I thought, I've got to give something, because if I don't give something, he's not going to keep doing this. That was what I believed. That is not true, by the way, but it's what I believed, and he was meeting me where I was at. So I'm sitting there going, you've got 30 days. I'm going to give you one calendar month. Now let's keep in mind, I woke up that morning going, we're getting rid of this today. Like, something's happening, right? So now he's released the burden a little bit. I'm like, okay, I'll give you a month. I'll give you 30 days. And in 30 days, I want to see love and joy and peace and contentment and protection, all these wonderful things that you say you have that I don't ever feel like I've really experienced. That's what I need you to bring me. And in exchange, because that was where I was at, I sat there and I went, what can I do? Because I was exhausted. I was completely deflated. I had no energy left. I had no resources. I was not a godly person. I had a lot of godly knowledge, but very little godly action. And I was in a desperate emotional place. I was depressed and anxious, and just, the world was just dark. And when you're in that spot, the idea of adding any kind of responsibility feels overwhelming. It's just too much. And I sat there, and I'm being honest with God. So I'm like, you know what? I've got no energy left. I've got nothing left to give you. I can pray. I was like, okay, I can pray. God, for the next 30 days, I will pray. And the other thing that was very, very prominent in my life at the time was that my marriage was a state of war. We were in constant conflict, and we are both very strong personalities. If you know my husband, you know this is true and remains true to this day. We're both very vocal. We're both fighters. And we fought constantly and about the stupidest stuff, and we were destroying each other. And I was so done and so tired and had nothing left that I went, okay, I'm going to submit to my husband, and I'm just going to say yes to everything. I'm not going to argue with him. Because I thought that's what submission meant. I was like, I'm just going to say, okay, sure, honey. I was so resigned and so ready to just be done that I was like, I'll just stop fighting. So those were the two things that I told God. For the next 30 days, I'll pray and I'll stop fighting. And for the next 30 days, you need to show up. And if you haven't shown up at the end of that, then we're getting rid of this. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but we're getting done. So let's admit and acknowledge that was not a good heart place to be in. But like I said, God met me there. It was an extremely emotional day. And I was experiencing a lot of pain, but I was also gaining a lot of relief. And I woke up the next day feeling, now this is all relative, right? But I was feeling better the next morning when I woke up than I had for years previous. Still wasn't good, but the improvement was dramatically noticeable, because for a couple of years up to that point, getting out of bed was tough. And the next day I woke up, and I'd always brace when I'd wake up, because the minute I was sort of conscious again, it's like, what's going to happen? Or what, because I'm just feeling awful all the time. And the next day I didn't feel as awful. There's still a lot of fear and stuff running around, but it just wasn't as bad. I didn't feel as bad. And that was noticeable. And that was encouraging. Because like I said, I'd been thinking it wasn't going to stick. And here I was seeing an improvement the very next day. But I still wasn't fixed. My burden was lighter, but I was still carrying a lot. And for the first few days after that, that process kind of continued. I kept talking to God every day. And I was not talking to God like, oh, dear Lord, serene Master Father, please bring to me the peace that thou hast. It was very much like I would talk to you. Like I was a whiner. I was a complainer. And I was self-pitying. I still can be. And I was talking to God in that way. I can't believe this is happening. I'm so sick of this. I'm so tired. Oh, or those days when you suddenly, for random, your brain goes, remember that embarrassing thing you said 3 months ago? And now I'm in this mental spiral for the next hour about how embarrassed I am, or those people probably still laugh at me, or whatever. When that would happen, I would talk to him about it. And I was aware that when I had gone to him without filters, it had helped. So I was maintaining that. This is embarrassing, or this is hurtful, or this is scary, or I hate this about myself and I can't seem to change it, or my husband is a jerk, or my cat peed, or whatever it might be. Like, because you know what it's like when you're worn out, even the smallest detail, you're just like, no. So that was how I was talking to him, but I was doing it all day. And I remember a few days in, there was a point where I was really anxious about something. I was, I need to talk to God about it. Okay, talk to God about it. Felt more peaceful, felt more at rest. Started going back about my day, and it came back. And I caught myself in that mental loop again. Oh, okay, I talked to God about, God, this is what's going on. This is what I'm afraid of. This is how I feel about it, and this is why. Go back to cooking or whatever it was I was doing. And realized that I was going through this cycle just time and time again. And at one point I was like, well, that's not doing any good. I just have to keep talking about it all the time. And I got frustrated because I thought it's not helping. And the Holy Spirit's in my ear going, really? It's not helping? Because what was happening was I would talk about it. I would release it. He would give me peace. I'd go back into my day and I'd get triggered again. And I'd have to go back to the beginning of that process. And I was in the deception of believing that meant it hadn't worked. That's not true. It was working. It wasn't sticking because I was going back into that place, letting myself fall back. And as soon as I realized that, it helped me, instead of waiting for the bad things to come up, it helped me start just talking to him all the time and being thankful for the ways and the times that I was feeling better. So there's a promise around this. It's Philippians 4, 6 through 9. It's not in your notes. But if you want to make a note of the reference, Philippians 4, 6 through 9. Actually, I think it is in your notes. Don't worry about anything. Instead, Pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all that you learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing, then the God of peace will be with you. I was learning in practice how true that is. I got in the habit of going to God with the thing that was scaring me or the thing that was burdening me, telling him what it was, telling him what I needed, and looking for something to be thankful for. And early on, it was stupid stuff like my cat. My cat would love me unconditionally. He relied on me. He would snuggle with me at night. It was very comforting. I love animals. So early on, I would just be like, thank you for my cat. But the longer that this went on, the deeper and the wider the gratitude got, because I was seeing results and he was coming with me and showing me things. I was, oh my gosh, this works. And I realized his promises were true. And I started at that point searching his word for them. Okay, there's got to be more of this stuff. Like, what else can I tap into? One of the other things I was tapping into was the blessing and the jewel that comes in my life from being submissive in marriage. And I had it really screwed up, first off. But he was leading me. He was coaching me. If that is something in your life, or you want it to be something in your life, I'm doing an optional, fully optional. No one has to come if they don't want to. But at 3 o'clock this afternoon, I'm going to talk you through, if you want to, what God showed me through that, how it worked, how he defines submission, why it's important, why it works, why it's a blessing. And I just want to share with you that to this day, we've been married 21 years now. I went from having a husband who was saved by the skin of his teeth and showed no fruit, to now a man who's moving into leadership and his heart is soft. His family thinks it's me. His sisters are like, your wife has a lot to answer for. She should take the credit. And he's like, no, you don't understand. This is God. This is God's work. And I got to watch that happen as a direct result of some of the stuff God had me step away from and step out of. Anyway, the thing that's really important to note, my life was changing and it was feeling different and I was growing and I was falling in love with God. And the thing that was so crazy about that was that I hadn't done anything, right? We're so of this mindset that in order for things to change, I've got to start reading my Bible every day. I've got to start working in ministry or serving other people. I've got to never lose my temper. We have this idea that performance is what God will reward with spiritual growth. And it's not true. I'm not saying those things won't come. I'm not saying God's never going to ask you to do anything. He will. But what he's asking from you is not performance. He's not asking for achievement. He's not asking me to do right so he can be good to me. He changed me from the inside. Those things started to happen as a result of that. Up to that point, I had nothing to give. And I was really honest with him about that. And he was like, no, this is good. I can show you this. Because I had always been somebody who thought that success came by what other people saw or how other people responded. So I thought, in God's eyes, I could only ever be a success if all the stuff that I did worked. Or if all the ways that I worked for him changed for other people or made other people happy. And it wasn't that. I was finding freedom. I was finding freedom from fear, from stress, from the burden of my sin, from the burden of the sins of others against me. Like, I was finding freedom and peace, and I had done nothing. No circumstance in my life had changed at all. Nothing. From outside looking in, all people saw was, Amy's not losing her temper all the time. Amy's not crying every day anymore. That's all they saw. But for me, The experience of those circumstances was completely different because he was changing me. My heart was responding differently to what was going on around me. And I tell you what, it was so much better. So much better. So, I was learning that God didn't expect me to do the heavy lifting in my life. That's hard when you're used to believing that it's up to you and your responsibility to figure everything out and make it work, and then he'll be happy. I was learning that his love was what made me happy, gave me joy, fulfilled the needs in me, and then those other things just happened because my heart was different. I didn't have to sit there and go, oh, I'll read my Bible today. I couldn't wait to get into his word in the morning. My husband came home one day and he was like, this is getting out of hand. He's like, when you do your Bible time in the morning, you set a 1 hour timer and when it goes off, you're done. He was mad because I was just like, I couldn't get enough. And it wasn't because, I'm dead serious, it wasn't because I was doing anything. I was just absorbing. That's all I was doing. I was just absorbing God. And it was helping. So I just wanted more and more and more and more. There's because all my life had been driven by fear, right? So there's this moment in Exodus with the Israelites. It's in Exodus 14. It's verses 10 to 14. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. But Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. I am not claiming to be Moses, but I do want to testify to you that you can stand still and watch him save you. You can stand still and watch him fight for you. And he wins every time. Every time. So here's something I want you to chew on for today and tomorrow. One of the barriers that I had, that I believe is just part of human nature, but particularly with God because he's invisible. I want you to think about that there's never going to be a day that you are going to miraculously trust someone. Now I'm talking about people at this point. What tends to happen in our relationships, we have to learn that people can be trusted, right? You can't learn that someone can be trusted without taking a risk. You can't learn if someone can be trusted without offering them something that it costs you to lose. We say we trust people when we let them into our lives, but the reality is we're not trusting them until we're offering vulnerability of some kind. Information about ourselves, access to our resources, love that we're offering that could be rejected. And until we're in a place where we stand to lose something, we're not trusting. And the problem is we learn from people that we don't know who we can trust until we're already in a place to get hurt. Right? So we get to a place where we're not going to trust anybody because we just kept getting hurt over and over again. Because even the best people will hurt us at times, and the worst people will hurt you on purpose. If you continue to wait until the day that you feel safe to take a risk on God, you will never do it. You have to be in the place where you are willing to risk losing something to him to find out that he's trustworthy. In Exodus, in that passage, the Israelites were literally standing on the edge of the Dead Sea watching death come. And they're lashing out, right? Why did you bring us here? We're all going to die. And Moses says, stand and watch, and he's going to save you. And they saw miracles. But if they hadn't listened and done what he said, if they had tried to flee, they would have been overtaken and killed. They had to listen. They had to take the risk. Moses was telling them, God's going to save you. Their option was to stand there and watch and wait and see if it happened, or to run. And they didn't run, and they were saved. Don't run. Stand still. Let him fight for you, because that's when you learn how much he loves you. There is a man in Mark 9 who brings his demon-possessed son to Jesus. And he says, Jesus asks him how long his son's been like this, and he says, most of his life. And Jesus says to him, do you believe that I can heal him? And the father says, I believe, help me in my unbelief. I don't think there's any statement in the Bible that resonates more true for me. Because I believe, help me in my unbelief. We have parts of our heart that are given to God, and we trust him with those. We believe. But we have so many places where we don't. So what I'm asking you today is to look at that. Look at those places where you don't believe. And instead of trying to fix it, just acknowledge it to God. Help me in my unbelief. We can't make ourselves believe things we don't believe. I see a lot of churches telling you that you can. I see a lot of teachers out there telling you, you just got to believe harder. You cannot make yourself believe something you don't believe. You can act like you believe it. You can talk like you believe it. But if your heart doesn't trust it, you don't believe it. Not at your core. You cannot make it. And you're lying to yourself in those moments when you, well, I'm going to claim that and I'm going to walk into it and I'm just going to believe. You're not believing. What you're believing in that moment is that if I do it right, it will come. That's not believing in God. That's believing in yourself and your own efforts. So we're not going to do that. We're talking about acknowledging where we don't feel sure and we don't feel safe. And taking that to God and saying, I don't feel sure of this. I don't feel safe with you in this part of my life. I'm scared of the decisions you will make if I give this up to you. If you are willing to change, or be changed, I should say, if you're willing to stop trying to achieve and control and start relying on God, there's 2 steps. The first is to mentally or intentionally submit control to God. And that means, here's the problem, Lord. I don't know how and I don't know when, but I believe, or I'm going to try and ask you to help me believe that you can change that. See, what we usually do is we say, here's the problem, God, and here's how you're to fix it. And when he doesn't do this, we go, well, he's not listening. He doesn't care. But here's the thing. If you're a parent, you know this. How often does your kid come to you and go, I want chocolate cake for breakfast? And you're like, chocolate cake for breakfast is going to make you sick. I'm not going to give you chocolate cake for breakfast. And your kid throws a fit. You don't love me. I hate you. Whatever. You know that's not good for them. You're not going to give it to them. You're not going to do it. And it's not because you don't love them. It's because you do. So that's where we get stuck. So what I'm asking you to do is let go of the how and the why and the when. Just identify what the problem is and say, Lord, I know you know how to fix this. So we're giving up the how and the when. You're putting yourself at God's mercy when you do that. And that's scary, right? Because if I say you get to choose, what if he wants me to continue going through this for another decade? That's scary. We don't want to give up that control. So wrestle with that. Lord, I want to give you control. I want to feel safe with you, but you might ask me to do this, or you might ask me to endure that, or you might ask me to lose this person or this relationship or this job, and I don't want that. The second thing we do is follow where he leads. So if you sit there and you say, okay, Lord, I'm going to let you choose. I'm going to let you choose when. I'm going to let you choose how. And then you wait. Don't move until you know you've seen him walk ahead. You're not the one plowing through, right? Because this is what we tend to do. I see these things physically in my mind. God's standing in front of me and he goes, I think you need a new job. I'm like, sweet. I think you should be a writer. I'm like, cool. Boom, I am gone. And he's back there going, well, and he's still back here. Go, wait, we have more to talk about. There are other things I'd like to share with you first. And now's not quite the right time. But I've already, I've had the word, so off I go, right? I used to do that a lot. We can be prone to that without even realizing that we're doing it. Give up the how, give up the when. But then, when he does step ahead, follow. So follow means not moving past him, right? It means being patient, willing to wait. It also means being humble. What if he asks me to just suck it up? What if he asks me to take the fact that my coworker is being a jerk? What if he asks me to show love by being kind and gentle to a person who hates me? What if he asks me to wait for the spiritual change in my husband's life? What if he asks me to watch my son get addicted to drugs? Because I don't want any of those things. But those things happen in our lives. Am I willing to only go where he leads? And being led means following. It doesn't mean choosing and controlling. It means watching where he stepped and then stepping in behind him. In your small group discussion, it's all going to be about God's promises. And the reason for that is because this was the phase in my life that God was opening himself up to me by showing me the places in his word where he's very tangible. He very, very clear about this is what I will do for you. This is the kind of person I am. This is the kind of life you can expect with me. And when we get those in our heads, there's two things that can happen. One, if we believe it, it's an easy way to see God at work because we walk into it and we watch him keep responding and it encourages you and you get to see him there and it makes you more and more confident in him. The other thing is if you're not yet confident and you're not yet believing, it gives you very clear direction on what to be looking for to see him and to understand how he works and what he means in that. So, the thing that I want you to pay attention to when you're looking at the promises is that God is more interested in your motive, in where your mind is focused and your heart is focused, than in the action you take. And I think this is it's a big deception that I had, and it's a big deception that I see all over the world in the church. God cares more about why you did something than what you did. And by that, I'm going to give you a very extreme example, but it's just to demonstrate the idea. You could have two men that from the outside look the same. They both are working with children. They both are giving up a lot of their time and energy. They both are giving up financial resources. They both are speaking admirably, showing great care and great attention and great protection. One of those men can be a predator, and the reason he does that is so that people will trust him with their children. And he's going to destroy those kids. The other man is following God, doing exactly the same work. But he's doing it because he loves God and he knows that those children need to be protected. Exactly the same action. We get fooled by people this way all the time. If all you're looking at is the external, you will get hurt. You will be fooled. God measures the heart. So you can do ministry because you want to be admired. And he tells you directly in his word that if that's why you're doing it, you've already had your reward. He's not going to add any more to that. You can do ministry because you think you need to earn his favor. He doesn't want you to think that either. Does it occur to you that sometimes he withholds himself, not because he doesn't love you, but because he doesn't want to affirm the messed up ideas that you have in your head? Because if he gives you what you want in that place, you think you have to keep doing that. And he doesn't want you to believe that. You might be doing ministry or service or loving people because that's how you feel better about yourself, because you've got a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, And you think that if I do that, then they'll like me, and then I'll be safer, and more people will love me, and maybe this world won't be so scary. He doesn't want that either. He wants you to understand how safe you are in his hands. When he protects you, he does not fence you off from the world. He will let you walk right into the fire, but he'll protect you in it. And it's a very different picture of protection than the world has, and than we have in our, because our idea of protection is security alarms and tall fences and closed doors. God is the opposite. His idea of protection is you can go anywhere you want, and I'm behind you and beside you and before you and within you, and I will take care of it. That's reliance on him, not reliance on me, or not reliance on the resources that I have. So when you look at the promises, pay attention to what he's looking for or what he's telling you in them. He is measuring why you do it, not what you're doing. And I already said, I'm not saying God's never going to ask you to act. I'm not asking you to act this weekend. This weekend is about being honest. It's a call to honesty. It's a call to being quiet and letting God speak and listening. There will be times he will push you forward, but you don't have to do that to meet him. You don't have to do that to see miracles in your life. He will achieve things for you and through you without your input. In fact, if you haven't experienced this already, probably the reason that he hasn't is because you've been so desperately trying. He wants you out of the way. And when I say you out of the way, I just mean your effort, right? Because that's when you understand that he did it. If I put nothing in and everything changes, I know it wasn't me. And that is a beautiful place to be. I can tell you that from experience. Stand still and watch while the Lord saves you. I understand, and I still experience, when pain is great, when we're exhausted, when we're scared, it's still hard, right? That never stops. I still have to consciously, every day, choose to submit control to him. It is not in my nature. My natural default position is I've got this. I'll take care of it because then I know it's going to get done. Or then at least I know I'm going to be safe in it, which is, by the way, the biggest deception. I can do everything in my power and things can still go wrong. So every day when things are hard and I'm getting it wrong, I have to go back to him. And the conversation we inevitably have is me. Oh, it's hard, I hate this, and it hurts, and I'm sick of this, and I don't want to do it anymore. And first he goes, I know, it's okay, I'm here, I know. And then when I get sort of past the mental block of just vomiting how hurt I am, then I get mad. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be in this situation or deal with this person or whatever it is. And he will sit there and wait for me to get to the place where I realize I only have two choices. I can submit to him and accept that he might be asking me to continue to endure this, or I can be in rebellion to him because he's brought it into my life and I don't know when he's going to fix it. So those are literally my only two choices every time. And inevitably now, it's not how it used to be, but now inevitably I get to the end and I go, okay. Because I know I don't want to be out of his hand. I don't want to be out of his will. Even with the pain, his way is better. I did it my way for 30 years and I destroyed myself and the world destroyed me. He has never destroyed me. And in fact, when pain comes and he's in me with it, it's awe-inspiring. He loves in a way that no human being is capable of loving you. And when you're sitting in the darkest pit and he's in your heart saying, I love you, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm not going to let you go. I'm not walking away. You're safe with me. Keep going. I've never felt more loved than in some of the most painful places in my life. And it's because he's in my ear telling me how much he loves me and that I can trust that. And that he's rewarding me. I'm doing nothing. I'm complaining, but I'm sticking it out. And he's like, good job. Last night, we were setting up dinner. I thought of this. last night we were setting up dinner, and me and Diane were each on either side of the table. We both had an open bag of chips, and she just brought a bowl out. And she goes, let's just pour them in. And I'm like, okay. She goes, you go first. And I just turned it upside down and dumped them in, right? Pulled the bag off. She goes, good job, baby. And she meant it. She meant it. She was like, oh, they just went right in the center, and they were just all in the room. And I was just like, what encouraging heart. But that is what God is like. That is what God is like. Simplest, smallest, tiniest thing you do, but you did it right. And he goes, good job. He rewards every time. He sees it every time. No human being sees it every time. Not one. Even the one that loves you the best, even the one that's most present, does not see it every time. God sees it every time you do what he wants you to do. He sees every step you take that's following him, and he loves you in it. He loves you even without it, but he applauds you. Can you imagine? The creator of the universe exalts you. His word says that. He will lift you up. If you look at the Old Testament prophets, there's more than one situation where they are overcome in his presence and they fall, and he ministers to them and gets them back on their feet before he talks to them. He does not want you debased. He says, you're my daughter. I'm going to hold you up until you're steady, and then we'll talk. And that's exactly what he did for me, and it's exactly what he'll do for you. And you'll never want to go back. But I just want to acknowledge that does mean daily submission. It does mean daily giving up control, especially when things are hard. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. In those days when you pray, I will listen. If you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. That's Jeremiah 29:11-13. And I find it really interesting that a lot of people don't go as far as 13, because that's a second promise. If you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. So what's the important part in that statement? Wholeheartedly. So we like to say, if you look for God, you'll find him. Well, no, not if you're only looking with a piece of your heart, that little tiny gap that you're kind of okay with trusting and losing. He's saying, look for me with all of you, and you will find me. And I can tell you, he means it. He will. And it's amazing when you do. So today in your prayers, when you're with your small group, ask God to reveal the truth of what he wants for you in your life. Like what he's willing to give and what he's willing to do and what he doesn't expect from you. Then stand back and watch what he does. There's no wrong answer. You're going to be looking at a bunch of promises. You're hopefully going to be finding one that works with. So if you weren't here yesterday, we identified a heart wound that we protect, that make us guard. That was in study 1. So now what you're going to do in this discussion is you're going to look at some of his promises, and you're going to find one. And if you know promises in the Bible that aren't in the list, please feel free. You don't have to use the ones that I put there for you. But we're going to look at his promises, and the idea is to find one that speaks into the wound that you have. And it's okay if you don't believe it yet, because that's the point, right? God, you say this, but I feel this way. So how are we going to bring those two things together? So our goal today is to pray into that. Help me, I believe. Help me in my unbelief. Just ask him to reveal himself in it, and he will. I'm going to pray. Lord, I just thank you. I thank you for giving me this opportunity this weekend. I thank you for all the women that are here and willing to listen. And I just pray that today we can all see the truth about our wounds and the pains that we hold and we carry. And I pray, I know that you have the heart and the power to heal our wounds and bring us satisfying and abundant life. I know that's why you're here. Help us to see where we are getting in the way. Help us to see where we can trust your word and the things that you offer to help us believe. And help us to see where we're standing in our own way. Please just let us see what's true and what's not, and help us encourage each other as well. And I praise in Jesus' name. Amen.